Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, where we help you master the art of negotiation and win the next deal. I'm your host, John Lowry. I am really excited about this episode where we will feature Dr. Dan Boone, the president of Trevecca Nazarene University in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Boone has been the president of Trevecca for almost 20 years, and he has led this institution to do incredible things in the lives of its students, but then preparing them to make a difference in the world. Dr. Boone's background is that of a pastor. He knows people and he understands how people tick. And so I'm excited about this conversation with him today because we are going to focus on the human element of negotiation. Negotiation is always between people. And so as sophisticated negotiators, we can't remove ourselves from having an understanding and having the skills to be able to work with people exceptionally well. Let's jump into this conversation with Dr. Dan Boone. Dr. Boone, it's great to be on the campus of Trevecca Nazarene University and great to have you on the Negotiation Made Simple podcast.
I'm happy to be here and welcome to the campus.
Well, I'm really excited about this conversation, really thinking about negotiation from a leadership perspective and really spending some time with you reflecting on some of the human elements of negotiation. But before we jump into that, tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about Trevecca Nazarene University.
Yeah, I grew up in southern Mississippi during the civil rights movement there. Martin Luther King marched in my hometown, jumped on the bike and drove downtown to watch him. I saw the angst of the Ku Klux Klan in our city, crosses burned in the yards of churches. So, it was an interesting growing up time there. Came to Trevecca as a student, first student in my family to attend college. And it was a world-changing experience for me here. It just set the sail of my life. Met my wife, Denise, had the opportunity from that. I majored in religion, went and pastored churches in North Carolina, and came right back here to Tennessee again, and then in Illinois for a while. Pastored two churches on college campuses, so really fell in love with the work of university campuses. And then came back here at the invitation of the university to serve as their president. I've been doing that for the last 20 years. Trevecca's a level 6 in the new Carnegie classification, highest level ranking of a university that you can get. 3,500 students. We are unapologetically Christian and have over 100 undergrad programs, about 30 master's level programs, 4 or 5 PhD programs. And we just find a lot of joy in putting the kind of people in the world that I think the world needs. Very proud of Trevecca right here in Nashville, Tennessee. We continue to grow. We're pretty close to triple the enrollment from when I came, and these are good days for us.
So one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about a college president is, at some respect, you are an educational leader and you're leading an educational institution. That's one part of it. But you're also the CEO of a very large business. What would Trevecca's budget be every year?
Yeah, it'd be in that, in terms of all the enterprises we run, we're in the 80 to 100 million range for a yearly budget and what we do.
So you're running an $80 to $90 million a year business. But then you're also kind of the mayor of a city. You've got police and you've got a bunch of students and you've got guests and visitors.
Restaurants, hotels,
all that kind of stuff.
Everything that you would do.
And so my guess is as you think about all of the hats that you get to wear every single day as leading a business, as managing faculty and working with faculty on the academic side of things, having to manage just the campus and all of the activity that goes on with the campus. And then the thing that I'm really interested in having some conversation with you about is, you also get to manage a lot as it relates to people.
Yeah.
And so you have hundreds of employees, but you have thousands of students and their parents. You have a church constituency that has its interests. And so I just want people to appreciate the dynamics in which you get to negotiate every day. And I think that'll be a great backdrop to our conversation. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, someone that's looking at the study and practice of negotiation really ought to look at the college presidency very carefully. I counted it up one day. I think it's 29 different constituencies that I deal with. So I'm changing hats all the time. And those 29 different constituencies, when they think about the single entity that I lead, they all want different things from it. They view it in different ways, from vendors to athletic associations to Federal Department of Education. I mean, you just have so many different relationships that you're managing. Some of those relationships are conflictual. That one group wants something from the university that's going to cost another group who wants something the polar opposite. So you're in the middle of trying to do that. And it's been a science for me of how not to become schizophrenic. Just that whole sense that you're living in so many different worlds on so many people's different planets, all at the same time. How do you keep that level of centeredness, peace, integrity, truth-telling? How do you stay in your own skin as a person who knows how to be comfortable with who you are?
And then in addition to this, you also spent several years kind of leading the organization of faith-based institutions across the country, which required you to go to Washington and do a lot there from a lobbying standpoint and so forth. And so your experience extends far beyond this campus in terms of operating on a national basis from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, about 7 years now, I've been on the board of the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities. I'm just coming off a 2-year term as their board chair, and I'm still serving on the board as immediate past chair. But, that's 200 Christian universities, 125, 30 of them here in the United States. I've had the ability to ask the question, how do associations negotiate for one slice of American higher ed? Mm-hmm. And the Christian universities are an important piece of that puzzle, but they're not the whole puzzle. So how do you negotiate in Washington, D.C.? How do you negotiate really in law courts? Mm-hmm. with the kind of religious freedom issues that might come up or the funding issues. So it's given me even a seat beyond the college presidency to work with a couple of hundred more college presidents, asking the question, how do we collaborate together to have the kind of right advocacy, right message, right brand for what it is we're trying to accomplish?
So let's jump into your role as you're the college president as negotiator.
Yeah.
And so do you remember kind of the moment where you realized that was going to be a substantial role going forward as a college president? And do you remember an early negotiation that really got your attention and was like, oh man, I got to negotiate well if I'm going to get through the day here?
I can remember a lot of them. Probably the heaviest negotiating piece that I've ever had. We have a sister college in Boston, Massachusetts, Eastern Nazarene College, that was in financial difficulty about 7-8 years ago, back before COVID. And I thought, somebody needs to do something or we're going to lose that school. So we went in with a plan. We got together here and we thought, what if we merge with that university? Wouldn't be bad to have a presence in Quincy, Massachusetts on the South Shore of Boston there. And we put a plan together, and it was a very generous plan. I became their president at the same time I was president of Trevecca. I became the chair of the president of their board of trustees. So I began to have 2 trustee boards that were working together under my leadership, 2 faculties working together. we took our core leadership team here at Trevecca, and they served Eastern Nazarene College in their role from here. So it was about 2 years of travel back and forth, working through, the mundane stuff. How do you run technology for 2 campuses from one spot? How do you synchronize your class schedules over 2 different time zones so that you can put students in virtual seats from one to the other? So, I mean, it's all kind of stuff like that. We had gone in to the Massachusetts government offices, their Department of Education, very early on and laid out, this is what we're trying to do. You're going to lose one of your schools, and we're here to try to do this. We want to create the merger for it. We went all the way through. We had brought them from a $6 million loss per year in year 1 down to $2 million loss in year 2, and really we had them right at the verge of operating in the black by the end of that in the beginning of the 3rd year. So we were seeing success that was happening. The accrediting body, there was a lot of accreditation negotiation that had to happen because Trevecca's accrediting body, the Southern Association, was very different than theirs. Mm-hmm. So we had to negotiate between 2 accrediting bodies how this would work. We got it all worked out. So we go into the Attorney General's office for the final closing and everything of this. And he says, well, we've got one more stipulation we're going to give you. And I thought, okay, what could this be? We've already laid this all out for you, and we've done what we said we would do. And he said, Trevecca's going to have to surrender your state authorization in Tennessee and move it to Massachusetts. I mean, my heart just sank. It was a deal breaker in every way. We really couldn't find any way around it. It would have been millions of dollars of loss for Trevecca in state aid in Tennessee, shifting of accreditation, everything. He couldn't understand why we wouldn't be thrilled to be authorized by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I said, we're really happy in Tennessee. Yeah. So we were unable to do that. So we had to back out of that, turn it back over. I remember saying as kindly as I knew as we left the office that day, I think you killed your college today. It may take it a few years to die, but I think you killed it. And sure enough, Eastern Nazarene College closed this past year. And I think we had it both savable and we had a thriving plan going forward. So it was one of those negotiation moments where I think we did it right. We did everything we knew, and it still didn't work out. I walked away disappointed, but in an interesting way, I was energized by the learning that occurred for me in the failure of accomplishing what we had tried to. It reconnected me with the humility that I think a leader needs to recognize you can do everything right and it still not work. And your value has not diminished as a person. The lessons learned, our whole team, the lessons we learned about doing this, it made us nimble. We all expanded our capacity. We carried heavier loads for a period of time, and then we all took a break together for a period of time. And during that time, Trevecca had its record ever 2-year growth while we were doing that. So I've looked back on that and said, I don't regret that we did that, but I also chalked up there's always someone out there who can make this not work, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, I love that story because it reflects some truths about negotiation that I think are really important for people to understand and appreciate. One is that negotiation is consequential. And the reality is that it's this process that either leads to success or leads to something else. And so the importance of mastering this process is critical. And like you said, you can master it and yet still not get a deal. But so many times there are deals that don't happen that probably could have happened. Yeah. Had everyone around the table perhaps been a little more creative, a little more skillful, a little more empathetic, whatever the case might be.
There is a postscript on this story. As Eastern Nazarene College is closed, the trust that we engendered now has people who had established endowments there requesting that they would be moved to Trevecca. It has Nazarene districts that are in the Northeast that are beginning to request that Trevecca be their education provider. The trust that we engendered is now resulting in significant enrollment growth for us, endowment growth for us. So there are pieces that, because we did what we did, and we did it without, we had nothing to gain in that moment. We were saving something that was precious to them. And because we stepped into their pain, now in this moment where they have resources of a sold campus and an endowment, where those resources are there, we've begun to be the beneficiaries of that. So it's, I always want to realize when I walk away from something that didn't work, that doesn't mean I'm not carrying value forward with me.
Interesting. Yeah. And the other thing that you've identified in here that's really interesting is this thing I like to call deal intimacy. And that is, the people, when you're around the table, you're trying to put a deal together that may be very adversarial at times. It certainly, depending upon the type of negotiation it is, it certainly can strain a relationship, but it also can bring people closer together to where they really get to know each other. They really get a chance to see how they operate. Values come to the table to where values get tested. And so you really have an appreciation for someone's values as a result of working through this process.
I watch even today strategies of negotiation that are always win-lose. And I've thought, I was never raised that way, trained that way. My Christian faith doesn't lean that way. I've never believed there always has to be a loser in something. But what I find is a deep value is I have the opportunity to enlarge my circle of trusted friends. And how do I practice that? What does that look like in the thick of negotiations? And one of the one of the gifts that I've always had is in the middle of those kind of times, I will find something laughable about it. I'll bring humor to the table.
Sure.
I'll find some way to say, okay, this is hard. I know we're at it right here. But the truth is, we're all going to go home and maybe watch a ball game that we like together, or, we've got kids that are waiting for us, or a dog that loves us somewhere.
Yeah.
And just try to recognize this negotiation is not the end of the world, but it's a moment in which we really can be uniquely human toward one another. And that's been important to me to practice.
Yeah, when I get asked the question about, negotiation made simple and the work that I do, one of the phrases I love to use to try to describe it is to say, like, I simply try to help good people do good things.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think negotiation adds value, is it helps good people do good things. And the variety of those things is kind of interesting to me, whether it's, running a university or trying to grow a business or trying to launch a product, whatever it is, but trying to help good people do good things. And so what I'd like to do in this conversation is really kind of focus on the how with you in terms of how you do things, because I think there's a lot that people can learn from you in terms of, and you've already described some of it, but in terms of how you work with people in order to influence their decisions, but also to partner with them to do good things. And so the first component of that I'd love to hear your thoughts on is how you negotiate with yourself. Now, some people are like, what do you mean? How do you negotiate with yourself? But the reality is that is the first negotiation that has to be managed, because you've got to decide, okay, what's my opening offer going to be? Well, that's a negotiation with yourself of, do I start really ambitious? Do I approach it in a problem-solving way? Do I come out really aggressive? I mean, it's a very significant negotiation that's going to set the stage for the rest of the process. But then in the negotiation with ourselves, we also have to solve for, how much do I care about the issue versus how much do I care about the relationship? And how do I balance those in this process to where I honor the relationship if I need to, but I also kind of have to pursue the relationship. And here on a campus like this, you have the fiduciary responsibility to pursue a lot of issues, but you do it in a context that you're trying to keep very, very relational.
Yeah.
And so talk to us about how you manage that internal negotiation.
Yeah. You've asked that question expertly. I mean, you've crawled into the brain of a college president very quickly in the way that you asked that question. Because the number of constituencies and the number of issues pile my desk with negotiation opportunities and possibilities. Mm-hmm. One of the things I have to do is carefully look at all of those opportunities and ask, which are the most valuable? The prioritization of what I can give focus to is critical in the role that I have. There's a hamster cage inside the brain of every college president, and the seduction of the job is you can think that you are succeeding just because you keep the wheel going.
Yeah.
And the raw material of stuff to keep the wheel going that you can focus on in any given day is endless. Mm-hmm. It's just always there. So the first negotiation I have to have with myself is, what am I called to do? What is most critical for me to do? What is the most important thing that I need to do in this particular moment? And I have to narrow to those things. Now, there's a internal negotiating skill called traffic cop that I can recognize that there are 20 other things on my desk that are really important, but my role may be to serve as traffic cop and direct those things to other people for them to deal with, and to direct them in a way that I can attach the level of importance that I think it has so that they fully understand what I might expect of them in that process. So that first moment that I have is that. The second thing I think I'd say on the self-negotiation is I'm old enough now, 20 years of a college presidency, to have the right to trust my instincts, to truly know that if there's some nagging itch in the bottom of my soul or the back of my brain, that I ought to pay attention to that, because that little nagging itch has been well trained through experience and wisdom and years of service and study. And I need to let that nagging itch weigh more. And sometimes as I listen, that little nagging voice there, it says, run, just run. And and I'll be looking at something that I think, but wow, if this worked, it would be worth this to us. Yeah. And what I've learned is the nagging voice has just about always been right. And I've stepped into some things that it looked promising, but it never really went anywhere. And I should have listened to the voice that said, just run. This is not it. The other piece is in the hiring of people, the employment of people, the securing of a consultant, all of that. Who will I partner with as a trusted partner in this? And in that moment, there's that innate instinctiveness. Yes, this is a good person that I can trust. Mm-hmm. This is a person whose resume is good, but their virtue is also really solid. They get who we are. I don't feel used in any way by this particular person or this company. So there is that self-negotiation to make sure that allying is right. And then the last one I think I would say is if I'm struggling, if there is if I'm playing tug of war inside my own heart and head, what I have to do is I have to get my heart and my head on the same page together. And the way I do that is journaling. I'll just sit down with a journal. 20 years of Trevecca, there's probably 80 journals that have been filled with handwriting. And it's, it's not even a typing it out, and it doesn't go anywhere. But what that act does is it forces me to force the stuff that's in my heart and my head down an arm, out through my fingers, into a pen, and onto paper. And then I can objectify what it is that I'm thinking and feeling. And more often than not, clarity comes to me in that act of journaling, where I begin to see it. The aha moments begin to come. A settling in and a peace about moving forward begins to happen. So those are the internal processes that I would have to start with.
So you raised so many really cool things here. First off, the whole idea of writing it down is powerful. One of my colleagues named Allie Fallon, she just wrote a book called Write It Down.
Yeah.
And it's a really, I've not read it in detail yet, but I'm eager to, because she makes the point of there is value in terms of writing it down.
There, I did my PhD work in preaching. And one of the things that I learned in that is the digital world all looks the same, but handwriting bears your personality. It expresses your priority. Do you press down harder with the pen? Are you reaching for a felt pen? Yeah. Are these bold letters? Are you organizing your thoughts in bullet point kind of ways? There's something about writing that is your personality also connecting with the very issues that you're trying to resolve. So I think to write it down is a real wise way to approach this.
Yeah, I love that. And I think writing it down is also really helpful in terms of overcoming bias.
Yeah.
And so as we think about bias, we'll have to do several different podcast episodes on bias, because I'm real fascinated by bias. But the one bias that has intrigued me is overconfidence bias.
Yeah.
And it's where we begin to drink our own Kool-Aid and we think that our view of the world is the view of the world. And writing it down is one of the ways to where, for whatever reason, it creates a level of objectivity to where you're like, I can't even write this down. Like, this is ridiculous. And it helps us with kind of a check to say, okay, and if we're going to put it in business terms, like a lot of people do, it's, okay, the deal you're looking for, put the term sheet together.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself, is this a good deal for you? And is this a deal that the other side would actually consider? If you were in their shoes, would you even consider this deal? And that exercise right there, I think, can be something that's very healthy for people in terms of putting together deals that actually make sense and actually have a chance of being put together, them working through that process. And the practical lesson of it is write it down.
John, I love your reflection on the bias of overconfidence. That's a great statement for a chapter. I mean, great heading for a chapter. I think as humans, the person who can most easily deceive us is us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we will bring our desired outcome to the forefront of a negotiation because we have deceived ourselves into believing that we're good enough to make anything we want happen. Mm-hmm. And it is not grounded in the reality of the contextual relationship that we're engaged in that moment. And when I write those kind of things down, you're right. That's where I begin to say, man, that's your pride talking there.
Yeah.
That's your pipe dream that's going on there. Yeah. I'm able to, when you objectify what's in your brain, you can evaluate it easier than if it's just running round and round and round in your brain without stopping. Yeah. So the writing it down slows me into a pace where I can begin to see what it is I'm asking of another person. Uh-huh. It also I think it's a humbling thing
Mm-hmm.
to write things down. My theology says that we are dust creatures. We came from dust. We return to dust. And the word for that is humility.
Mm-hmm.
And so the humility of a leader is a critical part of preparing to negotiate something. And if I lose track with that, I wish I could say this gets easier and easier for me the whole time I lead. But the truth is, when you've had 20 years of a pretty successful presidency, you can drink the Kool-Aid of that success and just take for granted that you can make something happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have that appropriate humanness or humility to actually enter that new negotiation, because with that person, this is ground zero. You're
Sure.
starting brand new. It doesn't matter to them you've done this for 20 years. You're just sitting there talking with something that could be important to both of you.
So now I'm going to turn into a lawyer. And, the other thing about writing it down that I think can be so powerful is writing it down also helps you understand whether or not you have the support for whatever position you're going to take.
Yeah.
And so you can take the position, but if you can't back it up with some level of argumentation, data, analysis, whatever, you don't have anything to add to that. You have a position and a blank page. That probably means that position is not going to hold or is going to leak in terms of your ability to really persuade the other side that that's something that they should consider.
Yeah, it's a part of the drinking of Kool-Aid of overconfidence is that your personality is going to close the deal, and so you don't walk in there. I've learned by error. So many times I've been in a negotiating situation and it went well, and I walk out of the room and 5 minutes later I think, but we didn't cover this or this or this. And so what I've learned is when I'm in the process of this, to actually write down not only all the data that I want to bring to the table, the principles that I want to reveal, the narratives that I think are important to be understood. I try to script out what it is I might say, and then make sure I check all the points. But the moment I finish that, I've got a new internal negotiating strategy I've got to work out. I can't walk into the room and ignore everything else and start dumping all of that on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I have to walk into the room with a listening posture.
Sure.
I have to walk into the room with an openness. I call this the difference between a front door and a back door negotiator.
Okay.
The front door negotiator just walks up, knocks on the door, and is so eloquent and personable that they don't even listen to the person except for, hi, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And, they're into their speech and they're just running their speech. And I know how I feel when that happens. I'm building resistance while this person is motoring on for the first 10 or 15 minutes.
Sure.
The backdoor negotiator goes around to the back door, gets invited in to sit down for a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. How's your day going? You're just connecting with a person. How are you feeling about this? Finding a way into the kitchen table type conversation that allows this table to become a place where the other person isn't building their barriers, but they're actually lowering their defensiveness. They're lowering their mistrust. So, I've done all of this presentation work, and now I've got to teach myself to hold back on that a little.
Yeah.
There'll be a moment when I can say, let me tell you what I've been thinking about this. There'll be that moment, but it's not 30 seconds after I knock on the front door.
I love that front door, back door image right there. There's a lot of research in sales that backs that up, saying that the most successful salespeople are the people that have mastered kind of the presentation, the interpersonal communication and engagement. are very outgoing, very ambitious. Those people do really, really well in sales. But then ironically, the type of person that does equally as well in sales are people that are very quiet, people that listen really, really well. They have the ability to be very, very empathetic. And so they're able to understand, connect, and respond to customer interests in ways that other folks are not.
Yeah.
And so what you just described there was that in this front door, back door. I think that's really an eloquent way of giving people a vision of it. There's lots of different ways to a deal. And your personality, the key is being authentic to who you are in terms of finding that way, and also thinking about who you're dealing with and what's going to be the best path in terms of working with them.
And all of that science says that there has to be a balance between your IQ and your EQ.
Yeah.
There has to be a right brain and a left brain that actually are both aware in this particular moment. There's so much about the human being that to be a student of how you negotiate with yourself to come to a particular moment, it requires some attention to the complexity of the being that you are.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I want to shift gears just a little bit and go back to another how question.
Sure.
There is the moment where we've kind of worked through all of this. You've kind of developed the approach. And now you're at a place to where you need to sit down with someone and have a conversation. And as a university president, I don't know if it's a privilege, but you certainly have the opportunity to have lots of difficult conversations.
That's a good way to say it.
And so tell us about how you approach what you know is going to be a difficult conversation, to where you have to negotiate something with someone where there might be tension, there might be disagreement, there might be people that are very hurt by what has taken place that you have to try to overcome. Talk to us about how you manage a difficult conversation with someone.
Yeah, probably the most difficult conversations are the ones that you're terminating someone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're beginning the end of their work in the university at some level. I think there is a deep appreciation for a process that has demonstrated that you or your organization has tried to help them become everything that you need them to be. So I think the groundwork for that is important. But once the groundwork has been laid and the work has been put in and the results are just not what you need them to be, what I find is the person appreciates it that you don't start treating them like a goody two-shoes, syrupy sweet, making up all kind of excuses. What I've learned is a person appreciates significant dignity that's being offered to them, while at the same time, the truth is being told to them. Mm-hmm. And quite often I'll use lines like, I have something very difficult to say to you, and this may be hard for you to hear, but I want you to know it's coming from a place in me that is not only deeply dedicated to the responsibility I have for this institution, but it also is seeking to be as considerate to you as I can possibly be. Mm-hmm. And then I'll start laying that out.
Yeah.
And I think the tone of that particular meeting is good. Mm-hmm. And there quite often is the shock or the pushback or the what if. And what I've learned is, rather than me suddenly taking the role of defending the decision that I've made, I've learned that doesn't do much good. Yeah. That only piles on reasoning for a hard decision. At that point, I learned to just take a position of silence. Mm-hmm. I just let them talk. Mm-hmm. I let them get it all out. Let them get to the end of that, and then I say, okay, this is on the way. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
But you and I are going to see each other at a Target 4 months from now.
Yeah.
How do we end this relationship in a way that we'll actually be glad to see each other, that we'll embrace as friends or shake hands or give a hearty wave? How can we make this possible? So for me, it is that whole sense of absorbing their chaos and then the giving back of calm and offering a future picture down there that says what's coming to an end today doesn't really have to come to an end. There is a future that you have and that I have and that we could have that will cherish some of the good things about this moment.
Sure.
So there's that sense that I try to negotiate that time. And in those kind of meetings, I think I need to speak about 20% of the time and they need to speak about 80% of the time. And so if a decision's been made, it's my job to deliver the decision and not to try to pound the nail in the top of the coffin.
Yeah.
Just deliver the decision and then let whatever chaos erupt, let it erupt and remain calm, controlled, express concern and dignity at levels that I possibly can, and then treat that person with the utmost dignity. And the interesting thing for me is I couldn't name a person, maybe one or two, that I've needed to terminate across the years that wouldn't today walk into my office and us have a wonderful conversation. So I think that's it. Then you've got your vendors that you are delivering bad news to. We're going here instead of there.
Yeah.
That's a thank you for your service. It's been wonderful. They all want to know, how could we have served you better? So I'm ready with that conversation. I think I owe it to you because you've served us so well. Let me give you the basic reasons we're doing this. And no, I'm not interested in renegotiating this. But if you find yourself improving your services based on the information that I give to you, you're free to come see me in a couple of years. I'll sit down and talk with you again. We've developed a trust, and so I always try in those difficult conversations not to tear the bridge down. Not to end a relationship in a way that future possibilities aren't there.
Sure. Yeah, the human element and the management of process that you described right there is really valuable in terms of delivering the outcome that you ultimately want to deliver.
Can I tell you one other thing with that too? It's a tendency that I had earlier in leadership that I was able to learn about. You can talk yourself into putting off those kind of difficult decisions a long time.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
I've learned to live by the principle, do today what you will be so glad next Monday that is behind you.
It is done.
Do today what you'll be glad next Monday is behind you.
Yeah.
And it has just resolved in my life so much tension, just carrying stuff around that was going to be difficult. I was going to have to do it. Why not just go ahead and do it?
That's a great thought of do today what you'll be glad is done next Monday. That's a really, really powerful thought. So in your years of experience, you touched on this a little bit in your last answer, but I'd love for you to go a little deeper for people. And as you've seen and worked with so many different people in so many different ways, what are the things that you have found to be influential? What are the things that you have found to really move people in terms of them going in the direction that you are trying to lead them? What are the things, and not just from a leadership standpoint, but again, kind of thinking tactically with folks, like what are the things that you found to be really effective in influencing people in the negotiation process?
First, I have to know that my heart is right toward them. I have to know that there is no manipulation or lack of truth or twisted data or anything like that. So I have to know the space between me and the person I'm negotiating with is clean for me to be able to be in their presence and have integrity and be who I am. I think if you're trying to carry that kind of junk in the bottom of your soul, it shows up in your body language. It leaks out one way or another in that process. So if I'm always who I am, I don't have to go back and explain who I was or some twist that happened in that. So I think that sense is important. And that kind of integrity communicates to a person. I've, a lot of times when I've had to have a difficult conversation with someone about you've got to stop doing this, or you need to stop doing that, or your priorities are really messed up, or your work ethic's just not what it needs to be. They already know it. They really already know it. But they have probably self-deceived themselves that, well, I work harder than anybody else in here, and I, so-and-so did that and got away with it. So they have walled up around their own needed self-knowledge a lot of excuses that they use to excuse themselves from what they could be. It's my role in a very loving but firm way to help peel away those layers of self-deception and excuses that they give so that they can agree with their very best self, so that they can be a person that they would really like to be, but they've deceived themselves out of being in that moment. So I think the way that I get to behavioral change in someone is to try to come along and help them peel away a lot of those layers. The other thing that's important for me is, and I kind of learned this from the biblical prophets. Now, the biblical prophets they carried a pretty big stick. They whacked the tar out of the people for, the things they shouldn't have done, shouldn't have been doing, and their ethical lives and all of this stuff. So they were bad news people first, but they didn't stop there. They became good news people. I've always believed that a human being does not fail to change because they don't have the right information. They fail to change because they don't own a preferred picture of the future. And the information might be an important part of the conversation. The bad news, you're not performing in these ways and all that. The bad news is a part of that. But at the end of it, where I really try to get is, how do I paint for them what would be for them a preferred picture of the future? Wouldn't you love it? Wouldn't you just love it? If one day in an employee meeting, someone just said, before we go, I'd like to just take a moment to thank Frank. Frank has done this and this and this. He has lifted us through here. He has solved this problem for us. He has made my life so much easier by what he has brought to our team, and I am so grateful for him. How would it make you feel to hear that? So I always want to end those kind of difficult conversations with as clear a picture as I can of what might make that person feel like I prefer that future to the future that I have if I continue to listen to my excuses.
Yeah. There's some great research in neuroscience that talks about how people are more influenced by what they might lose than what they might gain. And the research was done really around investors. And the researchers did a project to where they called investors at like 7 a.m. before they started work. So they're like shaving and getting ready, getting the kids ready for school. And they get a telephone call that says, hey, listen, if you jump in on this right now, like we could probably make, $100,000 today. And they'd be like, call me later when I'm at work. Like, we'll talk about it. So they didn't respond to what they could gain. But when the researchers called and said, hey, listen, I got an opportunity right now, but we got to jump now or we're going to lose it. It's probably $100,000 opportunity, but it's going to be gone. the number that said, okay, I'm in, it was substantially higher. And so what's interesting about what you just described that I think can be such a useful tool for people is this idea, number one, of talking about what you have and the ability and the importance of holding on to it. That's going to be really, really influential. But then you talked about this kind of ideal self that's out there in terms of saying, like, this is where you're headed. Mm-hmm. But if you continue to behave like this, you may never get there.
The bad news will get you here. The good news could get you here. I mean, it's actually putting them both together.
Yeah. And so to present this as this is where you are going. Now they have that to lose.
Yeah.
As opposed to this is who you could be someday if you change.
That's really good.
What's really interesting about that is it becomes much more influential in terms of how you just described it, to where helping people see what they have in front of them can be very, very powerful. And I think that's a useful tool for negotiators. So anything else before we wrap this up? I love this conversation, this kind of very people-oriented conversation. And it is so exceptionally relevant because I've never, and maybe we'll have that someday in the world of AI, but at least up until this point, all negotiations have been negotiations between people. Yeah. And it's people making decisions about whether to do business or work together with other people. And so that's where this conversation becomes so relevant. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, in my Christian faith, the whole idea of the telos, the Greek word for the maturing of all things, the end of all things. Mm-hmm. It is that goal to which we're headed. I think what helps me is that I bear within myself a picture of the common good where humanity thrives, where organizations meet human need, where people are served, where the broken are healed. This sense of an operational society in which people are neighborly and healthy and whole. And, my role in this is, I lead one of these organizations that's a part of trying to get us there. I want to always negotiate in a way that I'm inviting other constituencies, organizations, people into that dream to make it better for everybody. So I find that I not only have my institutional hat on, but I have my, this is how the world ought to work hat on. When I'm in that kind of space, I'm in a good and a healthy space. And I find that it draws the best out of other people when we suddenly realize this negotiation between us is going to do good for some people that have no clue. I even have used a phrase a lot of times toward the end of a negotiation. So-and-so doesn't even realize that the two of us are sitting here right now plotting their good. I'd love to be on a fly on the wall when they find out what we did on their behalf. Yeah. And it just, the goodness that can be at the end of negotiation for everyone is a beautiful thing. And I think it guides and drives about everything that I do. I've got that picture of how the world ought to be.
So a couple of final quick questions. First, other than the Bible or any faith-based book, what has been the most influential book in terms of shaping you as a leader?
The work of Heifetz on adaptive leadership has been really helpful to me. The second one that I would lay right alongside of that is Edwin Friedman's work. His first work was Generation to Generation. But there was a little book that was compiled after he died called Leadership. The subtitle was A Failure of Nerve. Mm-hmm. But his family systems therapy, for me, it became a leadership model where you are, where you're the unanxious presence in the room and where you're naming the family secret that is going on in the middle of all negotiation, and where you do not yield to the sabotage of the weakest person who is, playing martyr and demanding all this kind of stuff. Edwin Friedman's work has been very helpful to me alongside the work of Heifetz.
Good deal. This has been an episode just chock full of wisdom. Dr. Boone provided a number of insights. There are three of which I think are really important. One, he talked about the importance of listening to our gut. And I loved how he described when making those internal decisions, when managing that negotiation within ourselves, how critically important it is to align your head and your heart. How sometimes we can be deceived into thinking this is going to be all great. And in thinking that, we can remove the reality that there could also be very substantial challenges. And so I love that idea of listening to our gut, especially when our gut is telling us this may not be something we want to pursue. But then he also shared with us some really significant insights related to dealing with people, especially when negotiating with people when emotions are high, or when the stakes are high, or when it's a difficult moment. And the importance of really separating the people from the process, doing what you've got to do in terms of getting the deal or solving the problem. But while you're doing that, treating people with dignity, taking care of their emotions, giving them a sense to express themselves, and to do so in a way to where you're not looking to be defensive. You're determined and disciplined in doing what you have to do, but you do it in such a way that they can save face and they can move on in a healthy way as well. And the last thing he talked about that I thought was so very insightful was the wisdom of writing things down. His 80 or so notebooks that he has produced as the president of Trevecca. The importance of writing out your plans, writing out your thinking, letting yourself speak through the written word. And as we recognize the importance of preparation and negotiation, there perhaps is nothing more powerful than writing it down. That's what the negotiation preparation tool that I've produced is all about. It is a framework with which you can write down your strategy. And if we write it down, we'll be more committed to it. And by being more committed to it, it will cause us to be more disciplined and more successful at the table. Thanks for listening to this episode of Negotiation Made Simple, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.